Welcome to another episode of Coffee Time. I'm your host and coffee drinking companion, Natalie of Natalie Christina Coaching. Coffee Time is a space where I invite you into the everyday, real talk conversations I'm having with the magical humans in my life. My sole aim, SOUL, is to create as genuine a connection as possible over this virtual platform. And I am so excited to be inviting you along for the ride. Together, we laugh, we rant, we introspect, all the good stuff. So without further ado, let's dive in. So I know on our first chat, I talked about having had fairly minimal experience, but very powerful experience with, I say Akashic Records, Akashic Records. People pronounce differently. Maybe you can correct me once you jump in or like just share how you pronounce it. But I had a reading done recently and it was honestly one of the most transformative experiences I think I've ever had. And it also was really interesting because I think the overall premise behind things felt really kind of out there. Like it was like nothing I had ever heard before, but at the same time, it was something that just completely made sense and kind of fitted and answered like all the questions I had. It just clicked, which was really kind of weird and uncomfortable, but also right, but also like really supportive, especially with what I was going through, which was a lot of grief around different relationships, which I know we'll get into a bit later. So I'd love to kind of just jump in and have maybe each of you share a bit about the records, like what it is and kind of how you got into it.
Okay, so I'll start with how I got into it. I had 3 years of my life where it was repetitive dreams of aviation accidents. And it was emotionally severe for me because I would wake up upset. The first time it happened, obviously, you just think it's a dream, even though you wake up exhausted and you feel like that felt too real to be a dream. And that's weird, but it's the first, right? And then I somehow got the news that, oh, there was this accident in this one place. I'm like, well, that's oddly familiar with the area where I dreamt it. And then I like find out that I would find out it fell or, the area where it fell or how it fell, or if it was burnt on the outside the building, if it was cracked in half, the airplane, it would all be almost like a replica of what I was seeing in my dreams. So the first time it seemed like, okay, coincidence. Second time, the mind goes, coincidence. The third time you're like, no, this is not a pattern. Oh no, this is not a real thing. This is not happening. Like, this happens in the movies. This doesn't happen to me. And it ended up being 3 years, and it emotionally broke me down to the point where I saw it in a very negative light, because to me, I was seeing death. That's how I was seeing it. And so I was taking it very badly, to the point where I was avoiding listening to the news. I was trying not to find out about it, and it would still somehow make its way towards me, especially because at the time I was a pilot in training. I was trying to be a private pilot. So like, of course, my instructor would come to me at some point, or my classmates, and be like, did you hear about that airplane that fell in blah, blah, blah? And I would be like, oh, no, not again. I already knew, because I would know the area. Like I only remember a few because I totally blocked that area, that moment in my life. Mm. But I remember the one in Brazil that fell in the water. And that one hit close to home because I was living in Uruguay at the time. So I remembered it, and I remember the area in the water. And and in my dream, I saw people on the coast looking at it, and I was standing on the ocean looking out, like standing on the water looking out and seeing it kind of fall. So that one hit close to home. And the only good dream I had was the Hudson River. Like, I had the dream of the Hudson River one, and that was the only one where like everybody made it. So that was like a good one, and it was a very weird one at the same time. But it got worse, and it kept progressively getting worse, to the point where at the beginning I would only see the airplane, and then after it moved on to me actually starting to see faces, and the faces of the moment of the person suffering. And then I ended up trying to externally go out and get help. Like, okay, I got to figure out, is there something I'm supposed to do with this? Like, this keeps happening. It's been 3 years. Maybe I'm supposed to somehow figure out how to like get information from these dreams and give it to somebody. I'm like, people are gonna think I'm like bombing these airplanes if I start calling, hey, American Airlines, by the way, you guys are gonna have like an airplane aviation accident. Like, people are gonna think that I'm doing it. I was like, I can't put myself in that position. And I ended up getting told by an astrologer that I had asked to help me. and he said, you need to get an Akashic Records reading. Akashic Records reading is how I say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to
Everyone
get an
says it
Akashic.
differently. I don't know. I'll just use it
Yeah.
interchangeably. I don't know. Yeah. Akashic. Okay. Noted.
Yeah. Akashic, because it comes from the word Akasha.
That makes sense. Okay.
And so, yeah, so that's how I got my first reading. And I like that you said that for you, it was, you said, I think you were, would you say the word spooky or a little uncomfortable that they already kind of knew?
Yeah, it was a little bit unsettling, but in a good way. I think it was because I went in kind of thinking, okay, you know what? And I do, and this is how I approach a lot of these different kind of spiritual, whatever you would want to call it, things, explorations of mine, is I'm not skeptical, but I go in just kind of really blank slate. And just, if I invest in this and nothing comes of it, okay. If it ends up being totally like not a real thing, but I benefit, it's still worth it. And then
Yeah.
there's also the times where the outcome of that is that something clicks and something totally makes sense. And I think I went in like very just open to whatever was coming. And it was kind of crazy because like I think even before we like, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology. You can correct me when you share since you're the professionals in this realm. But even before we went in and like opened my records or the records, I don't know how you would say that. I just started crying, and it lasted for the whole reading. And but it was like it wasn't like yeah, it wasn't an unsettling crying. It was like I finally felt safe to be able to do it. It was like the most natural release in that space. It was really interesting, and it definitely was like a lot of answers came that I think I knew, and but the way they came across, it just I don't know. It's really hard to explain it, but it was like a physical feeling that it just made sense.
Yeah,
If
it's
that,
an emotional release in a way, right? Like
yeah.
you're able to let go of things that maybe you were holding on to that you didn't even realize were there. And I
Mhm.
think that's the case for a lot of people with a reading. They finally come to balance, because you can't be in balance if you're holding on to all these emotions and these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so maybe would you, Lorena, would you want to share a bit about like what a reading entails and what the records are? Because I'm sure maybe, I don't know, no one might listen to this, but some people listening to this might have no idea what the Akashic Records said it
Sure.
are.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'll tell my story, like how I got there, and I think
Yeah.
Lucia has like a better way with words, I'd say.
Okay, awesome.
With this, and she has more years of experience, and I think she has like a kind of a better way to explain it. But for me, getting into this was, I don't know if I think we mentioned this before, and when we spoke before, we like here it's very common to try things like this, like try an Akashic Records reading and try different spiritual things just to get answers and to understand yourself. And I think that was kind of like my issue my whole life, trying to find myself and trying to understand myself, and to like, who am I, what am I doing, like what do I want. So I think a lot of my life was about that, and I started getting readings when I was probably like 23, I want to say, around 20ish. Um, and it was like trying to figure myself out, like, am I on the right path? Do I know what I'm doing? And I later went on to reading my own records, but had a lot of like trouble with it because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust the messages that were coming through, and I didn't trust like who I was, I guess. And years went by, and I think I the only moment I totally felt peace and felt like I understood myself was when I got a reading. And I left every reading feeling, okay, I'm on the right path. I know what I'm doing. I know who I am. I know where I need to go. And I know that I'm okay and that everything will be okay. And I always wanted that feeling. So I ended up trying to read my own, but had so much trouble with it because I wasn't trusting and I didn't feel connected to the records at the time. But, years went by. I still struggled like all those years. I'm 38 now, with just loving myself and accepting myself, and went through some really hard things, and got like I think the universe and my soul pushed me back to the Akashic Records, and I started opening them up again and feeling more connected because I was journaling a lot at the time. And one day I called Lucia and I'm like, okay, we always like talk about a lot of spiritual stuff. And I go, oh my God, I need to learn to read other people's Akashic Records. Like, I know I need to do it. I don't know what, but it was like this all-knowing feeling. And the next week I was already studying with my teacher in Uruguay. And in a month I was already ready for my 30 readings, which I did free. And I did over 30, actually. I did more. And then I was like, all right, I'm ready. And it's the only time in my life I feel like I'm doing something that completely aligns with me and feels like I'm home. Like when I do an Akashic Records reading, I don't feel like I'm judging myself. I don't feel like I'm judging others. I feel in complete balance, and I feel like I'm able to give back something, where I don't think I felt that ever in my life. Like, you can do a kind act for somebody, but not in this way. It's so much more profound. And then someone being able to later message you and say, like, your reading helped me so much. I understand everything now, and I have so much clarity, and I can move about my life in a completely different way. Like, that gives me chills. Like, it makes everything worth living. I don't know how to explain it, but it just feels so aligned with me and who I've become. And it was part of my path. Very different from Lucia's story, obviously, but I think everybody's story is different, you know. We just need to be true to ourselves. But I think, Lucia, you can explain what the Akashic Records are. I think you're very good at this.
So the Akashic Records, I try to describe it in a tangible, human brainy kind of way so that anybody can understand it. Imagine this like infinite library. So you're standing in this, it's almost like a long corridor, and it's just books from ceiling, you know, all the way down to your feet. It's just books. You can't even finish seeing the end of it. That's what the Akashic Library would be. And so the Akashic Records are basically your soul book. Your soul has a book, just like my soul, Lorena's soul, animals, plants, anyone that's ever incarnated, even if not they're incarnated now, that they passed away, they also have, their soul has a book. So the best way to describe it is that each soul is the author of its own book. And if you were to bring that book down from the library and open it, the information you'll find in it is all the lives that soul lived, including the current life, and its contract, pending karma, pending lessons, pending, you know, plans for future, either this life, future, or future lives. Because sometimes you might find in your book, in a future life, you're going to be doing this, because we pre-plan things, but it's all kind of like nothing's concrete till you get there kind of way. And even our soul contract's going to be in that book, which is one of the most important accessible parts of the book in itself, because that's where a lot of the information from the people's question come from. A lot of questions you'll get as a reader is, what's my mission? What am I good at? What are my abilities? Why am I having issues with this and that? And all that can be easily found inside of the contract, which is inside of your soul book. And so the Akashic Records is that infinite library that contains all the books of the souls, the Akashic book.
And I'd add in there, like, it contains information from like your desires, your intentions, your thoughts, acts, like anything from, you know, this life, past life, and sometimes even future. So everything's recorded, and that's something that we need to, I guess, kind of keep in mind when you get a reading, because you can ask about feelings that you have, or relationships, or things that are happening, and like understand why they're happening. So it's kind of an avenue. It's a tool, because it can be something you open yourself, or you can have someone else open it. It's a tool for you to understand yourself better and where you're at, understand your relationships, understand your relationship with people, things, and just your path in general. I think it's just such an incredible way to come to terms and peace with where you're at in life right now, and be able to understand it and heal it.
Yep.
Love that. Yeah, and that totally resonates from the one experience that I've had. But also, I think, like, when we all first did our little preliminary chat, I mentioned for me, a big thing that so far this exploration has helped with is really grieving that one specific relationship with my mentor who passed, or I always say left the physical world, I think 4 years ago now. And my initial kind of entry into anything relating to this was reading that book I mentioned, The Eternal Validity of the Soul, the Seth Speaks books. And that's where like this couple, they channel the personality that calls itself Seth, I guess. And it kind of articulates just like really, I guess it's kind of like the meaning of life, but it's like the validity of the soul, like over time, and how like reincarnation happens and the journeys we go through and all of that. And that was the first experience, I think, where I had that moment of everything written in that book articulated something I had tried to theorize on my own, or a theory I'd read that was incomplete, and it completed it. And I had that click moment, that synchronicity, and kind of that feeling that, Lorena, that you kind of touched on, like how it came up for me was like, everything's okay. And like, this makes sense now. And I think when I first heard about the Akashic Records, it was like that in practice. It was like reading that book, but in practice, and it made it kind of an ongoing accessible tool, like you just mentioned, which is why I got super interested, because reading that book, I didn't think, oh, this is a thing everyone has access to, and we can use this. I thought, okay, I have this book and this is it, and I get to read it and be done with it. But it's like, no, there's, like you just said, like there's a library of books, and we all have kind of our own histories and whatever that we can read. And some of those contracts you mentioned, like that was a big one that came up in my reading, was that mentor and I had a contract, and she had fulfilled that contract, and that's when it was time for her to go. And I think I get emotional, but it's not bad. Like that was really powerful to recognize. And it also, once again, it just made sense, because I had so much grief, and like there was so much heaviness around the thought of, and I was really angry for a while. Like, why does she get to decide that I'm okay now? Why does she get to decide, that I can be okay through this? And then at the same time thinking that she was the vessel that gave me and carried to me all the tools I need to be okay through this situation, through, this person I love so much leaving the physical world. But then I think that was the missing piece for me, was recognizing or having it said to me in a different way than I already knew, of like, well, yeah, she gave you those things. Like that was kind of the contract fulfilled in a sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it helped me to be able to let go a little bit, and then also recognize that
Sorry.
bless you. That's okay. That we are still connected. And I think for a long time, and still sometimes, I'm learning as I go, I tried to force that connections in different ways. Like I, bought what is it? I have like a celestite crystal beside my bed. And I was like, okay, if I like cleanse this and I focus on it before I sleep, I'll be able to meet her in the astral plane. And like, this is what's going to happen. And like, no, it's not that linear, and it's not that simple. And I don't think, the same way is not always going to work. But I think that reading really helped me realize like I can still connect. And it also helped me be a little bit more gentle with myself about how and when I can do it, if that makes sense, which is what I needed for it to start to happen, because I don't want to be trying to force it from a place of fear. So it became a little more peaceful through that experience. Yeah.
A few things like I would add to what you were saying is that, her contract was up, her contract was over. She was able to, move on. Her soul was able to move on. And it's a really easy way to describe that is souls don't waste time. I have my contract done, boom, bam, bing, I'm out. Like they don't want to spend another day here more than they have to, not in a bad way, but because that means that he, whoever it is that's leaving, has the ability to leave the incarnation. They're done. They accomplished it, which is, wow, they were able to accomplish it. Sometimes we'll live to we're 90 and the body breaks down and we didn't even make it to finish our karma or a contract or whatever it is. So the fact that an individual is able to finish with all the lessons and everything it has pending in that's amazing. And they get to leave. That's actually a really good thing, even though human beings see it as, oh, they were so young, or if it was like a child, oh my God, he was so young, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really amazing thing. Being able to accomplish it in time before your body breaks down, that's like a plus for the soul. But also leaving earlier means that they can get out, they can start planning for the next one and come back as soon as possible. And that's what the soul wants. The soul wants to continue to expand and progress. Sometimes they'll take vacation breaks and not incarnate for a while and like work on the other side, whatever their job is there, which is their ability, what they like to work towards. But usually they're planning for the next life. And the idea is to get to a point where they don't have to incarnate anymore, because you become whatever level, it depends, because souls might be creators or masters or, guides or whatever it is they're working to be towards. Once they get there and they don't have to incarnate anymore, they learned everything they need to get to that next step. So yeah, I wanted to add to that what you were saying, so that like if the person left and their body hadn't broke down from being so old, then that's a huge plus for that person. They accomplished it, and that's great.
As well, I think there are also specific soul contracts that you have here with certain people or with specific relationships that have a beginning and an end too. It's not that they necessarily leave this physical world, but you accomplish what you needed to with them. For example, maybe like a coworker you're working with that you have a super tight connection with, but then you finish working and then you never speak to them again. Mm-hmm. They were in your life for a specific amount of time. They made you maybe see things that you needed to see, and that soul contract's done. They're still alive. You're still alive. We're still in this world, in this physical world, incarnated, but we have other contracts. We might have many contracts with many different people for different relationships, different lessons. And that all kind of evolves with us too, as we learn our lessons and grow. So that's also something to take into consideration, I guess, as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. And the thing that's coming up for me as you both share that is kind of that the Akashic Records are almost a context through which we can understand and give meaning to the interactions we have. And I think the important thing about that too is like this context can be really, really powerful for some people, and for other people, it might not resonate at all. And like, that's okay. But I definitely found in the small little exploration that I've had so far that it really was, it's just like everything lined up. And I know it's been really beautiful too, to be able to share, like I found out through my reading that I have a contract with my brother. And I think the big thing that was pointed out was that contract being carried out in this lifetime doesn't mean that we will both get the same outcome. But we're meant to experience this together and to be able, and it's been a pretty heavy thing for my family to have to process what that means. I don't want to overshare because it's not just my story. But to be able to even explain that to my mom, who does not delve into these spiritual things at all, but I shared and I was like, well, I did this reading and this is what was said. And it's like, him and I are meant to move through this together. That's why we're here right now. And like, that helped her just to breathe through it, and like, that was really powerful, even for someone who maybe isn't as interested in fully exploring and diving into the records. And so I think that way that it has brought even that small bit of healing just through a little bit that I've explored, like to my family, is really amazing.
Yeah, the knowledge itself is just healing. Mm-hmm. Because you understand where it's coming from, why the dynamic or why the issues. Mm-hmm. And then it's like we get stuck on this very, I think like very three-dimensional plane of like everything's black and white, and it's not like that. And I think when you get a reading, sometimes it can just make you dig deeper into the issues and understand it, and then you can accept the person or accept the issue or accept what's going on, and then you feel lighter and you can interact with the other people better and live your life kind of just understanding it more,
Yeah, acceptance was the word coming up for me too. I love that.
Acceptance.
Yeah. That reminds me of like when I got my first reading, and I had gone, and the biggest question in my first reading was, why am I having these dreams? How can I get rid of them? Or what am I supposed to do if I'm supposed to keep them, right? Keep having them. And I went in a very earthy mind, because I wasn't a very spiritual person at the time. So I walk in expecting some sort of like earthy response, which now I look back and I go, that was weird. Why would I expect an earthy response from the Akashic Records? That doesn't even make any sense. But yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting for some reason. And the response was basically, that was my wake up call. And then they went on to obviously they dived in more and explained more and all that stuff. But the gist of it was, some people have really severe, car accidents. Some people lose a limb. Some people get, cancer and survive it. Like, everybody's wake up call can come in different forms. And mine was those dreams and making me feel dread and waking me up to think, wait, what's going on? How am I how am I seeing the future? This is weird. And it was because they wanted me to become a Akashic Records reader or some sort of intuitive to receive information, because they're like, we're just trying to show you that you can use your brain for something more than just thinking. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, never considered that though. Okay. And so I jumped at the chance the second that the teacher finished, or she's a teacher too, the reader finished the session with me. I was like, okay, you teach? Okay, sign me up. Like, I want these dreams done now. But I left the reading. Not only did that, like, that ended up going away. I learned to be a reader as soon as, like, her first class came out after that, and it went away. So I never had them again, which, thank goodness. But also I remember it so clearly because it was so many years ago. This must have been like, what was it? 13, 14, I don't know. It was so many years ago, but I remember leaving that house, her house, and feeling, oh my God, I'm not alone. Mm. That was like my biggest thing, because she was like, your soul says, and then she would talk and say what my soul is saying, your master saying, your guide saying, and I'm going, wow, I'm totally not alone. I have all these people, like all these souls, all these, energies speaking to me, and they know me well, and they know what makes me tick, and they know what makes me happy, and they know everything. I'm like, wow, I'm totally not alone. And that was the first time in my life I felt okay, like anything can happen. I'm somebody's here with me all the time, even though I don't see them. That was for me like the most healing part of the whole reading, aside from obviously getting the response about the dreams. It was, I'm not alone. Like, none of us are alone in this. We're all together and we're all connected. That was like mind like blowing for me.
It sounds too like, because you mentioned going and wanting more of like a kind of, what did you say, earthy? Did you say earthy? Yeah.
I said earthy.
Yeah. But it sounds like, in a sense, that kind of spiritual tether that you got created that earthy response, because, that, like, physically, in a sense, you could settle, like maybe after the dreams went away, and kind of having that reassurance from the spiritual realm helps you actually maybe physically ground. I know before our call we were talking root chakra, so interesting. Right? I'm going to send you that passage, by the way, because I am kind of curious about that. Could you explain, since it came up, and like I have minimal knowledge of this, so I don't want to be the one to do it, but you said like masters, teachers. Could you both maybe dive into that? Yeah, awesome.
So when you get a reading, you're obviously grabbing your book, it's being opened, and we're getting information from it. But those are not the only beings present that are assisting us with obtaining information. We also have masters. Usually when I do a reading, I'll see that an individual has 2 to 3 masters. That's like the normal. Once I remember seeing someone that had 4, and I was like, wow, you're important. You got 4.
I've like, seen usually 20.
Really? I haven't.
But this person was like very spiritually awakened.
Like, I was gonna say that's like their own government. Like, I don't. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So those are the masters. We all have masters, and so and they come in and out. There's not the same ones. So depending on what point in your life, or what your current struggle is, what your current issues, what your chapter is at the time, depends on what masters interact. For example, when I became an Akashic teacher, I was told the name and the master and that it was a feminine energy, and they gave me that name. They told me to call on her when I started teaching, and that she was there to assist me with that. So, when I went into a teacher phase, they brought me in a master that assists you to become a teacher, like all that stuff. Okay. So it will change. Today you have 4, tomorrow you can go and you have 2. It doesn't mean that anything is important or not. It just means that they're giving you masters that can assist you, because they're like very specific to certain things. Like one can be for teaching, one can be for healing, so it's very specific what master is there and what their field is. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, we all have guides, but we have one guide. So you'll have a guide, Lorena has a guide, I have a guide, and we probably all have different guides. Depends. Sometimes we can have the same guide. If we have a very small soul group, we might all share the same guide, which is something normal, but you still have only one guide. And that guide knows you better than any other being of light. Like, that guide planned the life with you. That guide helped you pick a name, a body, figure out all the plan of what you're going to do in this life, and probably a ton of lives previous to this one. So they're with you through your whole growth process as a soul, from like a baby soul when you're just incarnating and figuring out even how to cope in on Earth, which is actually a really hard thing for the soul. And then all the way up to master, where you're like, yeah, you got a few down more and then you can be a master yourself, kind of thing. So they'll be with you all the way through that process. So they know you very well. So that's your master. Some people don't believe in angels, but those that do, you actually do have a being of light that protects you. Call them angels, call them a being of light, whatever you want. But we all have an energy level that protects ourselves, the physical part of us, because our guide is not protecting our physical ever. What our guide is protecting is our emotional state and our soul's quality and connection, and that if it's on track with what it's supposed to learn. Everything physical is dealt by another being of light, which some people prefer to call them angels. So sometimes your angels will be present, but they never really give messages. It's usually the masters and the guides. And then the librarians will be present, because like every library, there needs to be someone that understands where the books are, how to find them, and protect them to make sure they don't get damaged or, information is not stolen. So librarians are there usually just as protectors and to help us access and find the book in this huge library. So yeah, and then your soul, of course, because this is the incarnation of the soul. Mm-hmm. So you might, in a reading, depending on what the reader's like, because every reader's different, some readers will just give you all information. It comes from, all those sources at the same time. Or some readers will know who they're contacting directly, who's giving the information, and they'll say, your soul, like this reader had done to me, your soul says your masters are saying, or your guide says. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think so. So is it, I'm curious, is it always very clear, like, who, or I guess it's hard to say who, because we present different in different like physical lifetimes, but is it always clear, we'll say, who the master is? Or is it possible that it's a bit more nondescript for certain people?
For me, I just channel. Like, Lucia is more specific in that sense, but I sometimes can decipher between master's guides and the soul. So I know when that is, because I'll usually say they. But for me, in general, a reading is a lot of feeling and just knowing, and I just say whatever comes through. And I don't necessarily ask where it's coming from. That, I don't know if that's just the way I am as a reader, or if that's something that you develop with time. I'm not exactly sure, but Lucia is very different.
Lorena feels a lot, and I'm very visual, because that's the kind of human being I am. That's just the way I am. So they use whatever it is that is your way of being to connect with you more. So Lorena will receive feelings. Lorena's more emotional than I am. I'm an earthy reader. Yeah. That's the way I wanted it given to me. That's the way I am. Yeah. And so being an earthy reader, I want to know who's saying this? Where's it coming from? Like, I'm a little, that's the way I am. It's not like I'm demanding it, but I think they know that's my energy level and the way that I best channel it, understanding. And so for me, it's really actually easy to tell who it's coming from. I'll have right in front of me. So if I'm doing a reading and I do it via Skype, so it would be like this. I have you in front of me, and I see right in front of me, like it were you, the book. A little bit to the right behind the book is the librarian that's just kind of overseeing the thing, making sure everything's okay and protected. He might jump in and help. Like, I say he because I've never really felt the feminine energy of a librarian. For some reason, they always feel very masculine. But they might help us find a page where things are at a certain point. To my left, it's going to be the masters. So that's when I'll see 3 or 4, whatever it is, the number.
Or 20.
And, no. Or 20, like I was lucky enough to see, like, hi guys. Like, and then I'll have to the right of the book, the masters in the front to the left, and to the right in the front is going to be the guide. So that's how I see it. And so when I receive information, I can actually see where, like, it's almost like a light from what section it's coming, so I know who it is, but also I can feel it, different vibrations from each.
You're very
The
visual,
the masters feel really pushy to me. And the guys more like
they earned their title. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. They're like, they want you to get your shit done. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you can. Do not worry about it. Yeah.
And the guy's more like explicit. A mommy. Okay, good.
Yeah.
The guy feels more like a mommy. Like, okay, I want to tell you what you need to hear, but I want to make sure. Yeah, I want to make sure you're not too hurt. And the soul, it depends on the soul. Every soul has a different personality. I can tell you when I got my reading, that first reading I ever got, I left going, oh my God, my soul's not very nice. Because she literally, like, I said, I want to know if my question had been, because I remember it, because it like hit me severely the way they responded, like she responded to me. I said, I wonder if I have any karma to pay back. That's exactly how I asked the question. And she said, I would like for you to inform yourself that karma is not payback. Karma is a lesson that's pending. You better learn that, kind of thing. Like, that's kind of how she said it. And I went, oh my God, my soul's a bitch.
That's really funny. But definitely you'll be said things in a specific way, so it resonates with you in the way that you need it to resonate, so that you actually pay attention to it. Because if it's said in maybe, like, some people are like very jokey, you'll maybe get a lot of funny things through the reading, or like some readings I'll be cursing a lot, which I'm like, whoa, why am I cursing so much? And just you have to say what comes through. That's like our duty as a reader. It's like whatever comes through and you receive, you have to say it. That's your job as a reader, just to relay all the information coming to, even if it sounds really weird, or if it's not how you would normally say something, because it's not your information, it's their information. It's coming from their guides, masters, or their soul. So it's funny how that's also part of the reading being, like, every reading being so different. It's so dynamic, and it's so, you can just tell when you say certain words or a phrase, how the person, they're like, oh, and you'll just see their face, and you know it resonated, and you're like, okay, that's why it had to come through that way. Like, I get it now.
Interesting. Have you found, because I know you both mentioned, like, you kind of read in different ways, like Lucia, like you're more, like you said, like earthy, and Lorena being a bit more like emotional connection. Have you found that as you learned that that's how you go through this, did it like kind of make sense of prior experiences you've had? Like, I know maybe the aviation crashes, like that's a pretty like tangible reference, but I'm just thinking like, as like I said, I bought that book and I'm like curious to start exploring this. Like, I have an inkling that the way I access things, whether it's on this specific journey or, something tangential to this, is going to make sense of a lot of things that probably I found very discomforting growing up, because in this physical world, they did not make sense. And for me, that's more like auditory, because I'm someone where I've had many experiences, and some at times in my life where I was going through a lot of other things that made me think that was the reason. So like, before getting sober, like having what I would call an auditory hallucination, and it was very unsettling. But even now, like, as I mentioned, as I was opening up to like speaking with that mentor of mine, or like I've been learning to talk with my cat, like things for me seem to come through as like a really crisp, clear voice. And so it's very much an auditory thing. And so I'm curious as I go along, if I don't want to kind of try to control how it looks, but I'm almost curious if the way I start to access things is going to make sense of those experiences I've had. Does that make sense?
Probably. I could imagine it being, if you're already experiencing messages that way, you're probably more clairaudient than, clairsentient, like I am. And that will show itself in its own way. And I think with the Akashic Records, and this goes for anybody that might be watching, I guess, anybody can learn to read their own Akashic Records. I think that's something that we all have within us. And you have to practice, and you need to access them and be able to go in and see how that comes through for you, because it will come through different for everybody. And it doesn't always have to be just one thing. you might still feel things, but maybe your main source of receiving the energy will be through hearing, and that's okay. There's not like a right or wrong answer. That's why there are so many readers, because everyone's going to do it in a very different way. And I think also your personality and the way you experience life also affects you as a reader, because it's not like you're judging or you're using your reasoning or your ego or anything like that, because that's completely out the window when you open somebody's records. But it's more like just the way it's filtered when you say things, or the way you say it, or just the whole experience that someone has when you open their records, from the moment you say hello to them to the moment you say goodbye, and the interactions with them. And that's the same thing with yourself. I think that there should be no expectation, because the moment you have that expectation is the moment you block yourself, and that's where it gets hard. But I'm sure you're going to come back to us and tell us that it is that way, that you're going to be able to hear things for sure.
Yeah, I'll have to keep you posted as this journey goes along, but I think it'll be interesting, because I know like I definitely resonate now that I'm reflecting on it with what Lucia, with what you shared about those, like, we could say like premonitions or whatever you want to call it, because growing up when these things would happen, it terrified me. And like, I don't know if it was related to like outside issues. Maybe they enhanced it, or maybe more susceptible and I was less grounded, so I heard it in a way that scared me. Like, I don't know. But I think it would be really interesting to move through to a place where I could feel a little bit more peaceful about those past experiences, because I know at the time, like, they absolutely terrified me. Right. And so I'm kind of, curious to see how that comes through. So I'll definitely report back. Yeah.
Usually what happens if you figure out why something happened, and that happened to me in various readings I got. Like a psychologist, you want to have your own psychologist to help you deal with your things. Even though I can read myself, I want someone to tell me. Like, I need someone to tell me the nitty-gritty, because I'm going to make it easy for myself. I'm going to be, okay, yeah, I'll listen to them. Whereas you have someone that's in your face telling you, this is something that you need to do, wake up, and you'll be like, okay, yes. So for me, and that's also the way I am, I need to be kind of pushed to listen a little bit more than I would listen to myself.
I sense that when you from how you shared journey, about your master. Like,
my soul knows it. My soul knows it. Yeah. So like, I think that when you start and you learn, if you start learning to how you receive things, how it works for you, I think the most important part that I wish I would have been taught when I first started learning the Akashic Records and how to read is, these are the rules. This is what you're supposed to do. But you may find a better way to function. Just make sure to respect this and this and that, or whatever it is that we were talking about. But I never got that from my teacher. Like, I had an amazing teacher. I loved my teacher, and she taught me everything I needed to know. But she gave me such a big structure that it took me so many years of not channeling very well to go, maybe this system doesn't work for me. Maybe it just works another way. Like, a big thing was when I became a reader for other individuals, which is level 2, I realized that a lot of people would be like, I want to ask about my mom. I want to ask about my dad. I want to ask about my cousin. I want to ask my sister, my brother, blah, 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 blah. And like, you're asking these names, and I would feel like I wouldn't get much, or I would feel kind of blocked, and I couldn't figure out, or they would just give me a name and I'd have to ask. And so I was trying to use the techniques that they kind of gave me, and it wasn't working for me. And till this day, one day I was like, that's it. And I wrote down the name on a piece. I don't know what made me do it, but I was doing a reading for someone. I wrote down the name. I said, give me a second. And I put my name over it, and I repeated their name, and I asked for them to give me information about the individual, or what they could give me. And I came back at the person saying, okay, I received, it seems like this personality type, and they see this, and they feel this, and it feels like they're going through this now, or it was something traumatizing in the past. And it ended up resonating totally with the person. And I was like, oh, this might be the way to receive information from names now. Okay. And that's years I've been doing it like that. And every time I'm given a name, I put my hand over it. I have their Akashic Records open, but still I'm able to get information that resonates with the way they see the person and how. So no one taught me that. So you have to be really respectful with yourself and go, okay, I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to respect the masters, beings allied, and the Akashic Records and the library and the librarians. But I'm going to be true to my own individuality and learn how I channel things, because every channel is different. So that's the only thing that bothers me when I see like a teacher go, you got to do this way, it's going to be that way. Like, teacher students, this is the way I do it, works for me, this is the way that they recommend it, just make sure you respect this. But let it flow and figure it out for yourself. Like, that's something that you're going to have to find in yourself. How does it work for you? It's probably going to be totally different from the way it works for me or Lorena.
That's a metaphor for life too.
Yeah, I was going to say that it reminds me of something actually that I heard early on in my sober journey. Because I think for a lot of people, what comes up on that path is like sometimes that, and I think we had talked about this a little bit on our preliminary chat about kind of knowing everything's planned. For some people, it can be really unsettling. Like, it takes away from their thought of like agency, but I think the two can coexist in a sense. And we had explored that. And the phrase that comes to mind when you're sharing about learning and going through that process was like, the path is paved and I just walk it. And so it's like, the path is there, but how I walk it and how I navigate that, like, that's mine. And I get to figure that out as I go. And like, I know for me in my sobriety journey, like at the beginning, I needed that structure. So like maybe that's what you needed when you first entered, was like, boom, boom, boom. This is exactly what you do. Follow it to a T. And then as I move forward, I was able to let go of that and know when it was right for me to maybe, take the little like road off to the side and like loop back around or whatever it is. And I could kind of follow that a little bit more intuitively, but I needed that really structured, maybe in your sense, earthy base to go off of before I could figure that out.
It's I think that's just life in general. Like, we're all given so much structure in life, and especially in the spiritual realm, I think, there's so many things. There's Reiki, there's, Akashic Records, there's hundreds of things now that we can all feel called to do or help people with. And there is a bit of structure to it, but then we also have to listen to ourselves. And I think that's an important part of just our living this 3-dimensional life, but also with the spiritual path that we're on, of being able to trust what comes through. And even Lucia's little tip about like how she does the chant, like I use that now. And it's helped me immensely.
I didn't know.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's helped me so much, but it's not even me. It's helping others. Do you know what I mean? And just sharing information sometimes can help other people and their journey. And that's how we, like, as teachers, Lucia and I also, we're applying that too. It's like, listen to yourself. Don't just take every single word we say and do everything to like in this little structured way. Like, figure your own way around it and see what works for you, as long as you're, respecting people, respecting yourself, and respecting whatever spiritual practice that is. Anything is possible. And that's the way we can advance with our practice and with ourselves and trusting ourselves more. It's like, sometimes it's a very fine line of like, just, dipping your toe on the other side and being like, let me just try this. And just trying something can change your whole way of receiving messages or information. It's interesting.
What about if I hadn't trusted that? Like, the moment that I had that person in front of me, they're giving me a name, I was kind of new to it all. I was already knowing that was a struggle for me getting names. I want to give them the best reading I can. So that was the problem at the moment. And it's almost like they pushed me, because my masters are also there to help me while I'm doing the reading. So it's almost like they pushed me. I could have not listened to myself. And like Lorena's biggest issue of not trusting herself, I could have not trusted that urge. And I would never discovered that way of getting information, So that's the important part. Whatever it is that you like, I'm going to try this. Yeah, trust it. Try it. Because there's a reason why you're getting almost every urge we have has a reason.
Agreed.
That's beautiful. I love it. I'm looking at the time. I don't want to keep you both too long, but I was feeling a pull to ask kind of a general question, but whatever kind of comes first to mind. I really like to do like first thought, best thought of what would you say is either and or the biggest shift or like most surprising thing that has happened in your life through your process of accessing the records and that journey you've taken?
Oh, that one's easy. I'm no longer angry with the world.
It's beautiful though. Yeah.
Yeah.
I trust myself and trust my path more. And like understand that life has way more layers to it than I ever imagined before. But more, I think the underlying feeling below all that is just the trusting that everything's going to be okay, trusting myself, which has been a journey for sure.
I love it. Well, thank you both so much for your time here today. I feel like I really love all the range of topics that we covered, and I really appreciate you both showing up and sharing openly and helping make this topic accessible to me and accessible to anyone who tunes in. Because especially if this is your first time exploring something on this spiritual path, this could be a lot. So yeah, so no, I really appreciate that, and thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
This was great.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Coffee Time. As always, I invite you to reflect on it all, take what you like, and leave what you don't. If today's episode resonated, comment below or screenshot and share to your social media. And don't forget to tag me at I am Natalie Christina on Insta. And I would super appreciate if you hit the subscribe button to help make this show accessible to more magical humans like yourself. Until next time, I am your muchly caffeinated host, Natalie of Natalie Christina Coaching.